My name is Sunshine Frère, and I'm an artist and curator who lives in Vancouver. I'm the guest curator for the exhibition that's on at the Richmond Art Gallery that's called Eternal Return. The Eternal Return exhibition started initially with the Richmond Art Gallery and the Richmond Museum's idea to collaborate for the first time and produce an exhibition together. And the idea started along the lines of the museum providing artifacts for artists to look at and respond to, and the gallery working with the curator to put together the responses of the artist and show both the artwork that the artist produced as well as the artifacts from the museum. I was personally excited to work on this project when I was invited to guest curate here at the Richmond Art Gallery because my interest in my own art practice as well as in curation often involves looking at objects and how their value and their ideas transform through time and also through just looking at them in different ways. The idea of the eternal return is something that I have long been thinking about. This idea that history and events and instances repeat themselves over time, I think is something that I come back to a lot. When I thought about this show and I matched together the idea of the eternal return, my thinking was looking at objects and how the life cycle of an object also has really interesting instances where it repeats itself, where if you look at clothing, for example, articles of clothing fall in and out of fashion. Something becomes valuable or loses value over time or depending on tastes that society has. So I thought the idea of an eternal return, exploring objects in a museum where an everyday household object was maybe being looked at as an artifact or trying to reveal aspects of our history and our culture, how the object transforms from this everyday object into an artifact was an interesting idea for artists to explore, which I think a lot of them already do, but I thought that idea fits really well with the exhibition.
My name is Barb Choit. I am an artist. I currently work in Vancouver. I use a number of mediums, but currently, I primarily use photography and installation. My work in the exhibition is 3 large photographs. They are printed on photographic signage material so they can be adhered directly onto the wall as photo wall murals. All of the objects, as well as the large-scale photographic murals, relate to fresco paintings on the walls of Pompeii. What interested me about the murals of Pompeii is they showed what were important or had relevance to a culture after the culture had been destroyed. And museums can function that way. For the objects that I chose, I started out with the idea that I would choose those objects that actually physically resembled specific objects in specific frescoes in Pompeii. There was a lot of tourist objects in the collection, and there was a lot of sort of basic domestic objects. So that again refers back to the murals of Pompeii, which really focus on domestic, everyday objects. I used a lot of objects that probably had a very low value. And to me, that was interesting that those objects are in the Richmond Museum's collection in the first place. And so my idea behind the piece, which is called Richmond Reconstructions, was playing with a practice called reconstruction archaeology, where museums will take artifacts and reconstruct specific environments or specific archaeological situations that they might not have knowledge of in reality, but reconstructing scenes so that appeal to tourists and museum viewers. So my works are a play on that.
Hi, I'm Kevin Day. I'm an artist based in Vancouver, and my work usually takes the form of media installations. The title of my piece is Study Guide, Speech-to-Text Misrecognition. My piece in the exhibition is an audiovisual installation that incorporates the museum artifact. It emerged out of a curiosity to engage with the school desk chair and its references to the pedagogical experience of consuming, producing, and disseminating knowledge. Through the work, I intended to explore what some scholars have argued to be a very close relationship between vision, digitality, and knowledge, and how this relationship is further complicated with sound, which functions as another piece in this pedagogical assemblage, creating an experience that perhaps eludes coherence and emphasizes the slipperiness and the limits of knowledge. I chose the object because I am currently back in school, so I'm constantly thinking about classrooms and learning and teaching. So when I saw the school desk chair, it really spoke to me, and it became the basis for this piece. The video references interfaces, taxonomies, databases, and organizations of knowledge, and was animated frame by frame in Photoshop and consists of about 1,000 frames. In addition to the video, one can approach the piece like a classroom setting, with the sound offering multiple voices, perhaps external, internal, that might emerge from this pedagogical setting. My practice draws from media theory and philosophy of technology, and it often engages with concepts such as algorithmic culture, information capital, mediation, and other digital and socio-political configurations. I would suggest the piece fits into the curatorial theme through a focus on the persistence of incoherence and a constant return of the contested state of meaning and knowledge.
My name is Lucien Durey, and I'm based in Vancouver. My practice engages with collections, found objects, and ephemera. I don't use a specific medium. My work often centers around something I found, an object I found, or a collection I've started. And that being said, I use a lot of sculpture, photography, sometimes drawing, performance, so a lot of variations. So my artworks fit into the theme of eternal return. Probably the most obvious way is that they're objects that have had a life before I took them and turned them into an artwork. So you might notice in some of the broken glasses that they're, wine glasses, vases, salt and pepper shakers, beer bottles, and then they've been gathered in a place and sort of recontextualized to make a new object. And I've often used kind of objects that seem discarded or underappreciated perhaps, or forgotten about. So again, this is kind of, I would say, like humble materials to a degree, being sort of raised to the level of an artwork. So the objects that I chose from the museum collection are found bottles and bottle shards from the Steveston Interurban Tram building site and the Britannia Heritage Shipyard building site. The artworks that I made were also from found shards and pieces of glass, and many of them have embedded narratives that I'm aware of, and I will be articulating through some vocal performances throughout the duration of the exhibition. My idea about the vocal composition is that it serves as sort of a caption to the artworks themselves. So, you could compare it to walking into a gallery and maybe you don't feel like reading a didactic panel and you just want to look at the artwork. I think of the vocal performances in the same way. They're not essential to your understanding of the artwork, but they are perhaps another layer of complexity that you could find interesting.
My name is Alana Ho, and I'm an educator and sound artist based in Vancouver. The work that is in the exhibition Eternal Return is called After My Garden Grows. So from the Richmond Museum archives, I chose 3 objects. One of them is an ancient Chinese wooden toy, and it mimics the sound of a cicada. The second object I chose from the archives is a set of 3 lithographs. They have text of Old German and also 3 very beautiful drawings of these girls with flowers. And they each represent a different kind of personality. In the archive, I also found a large collection of these scores that are meant to be played by a player piano. So in the installation After My Garden Grows, it's a sound installation in 3 parts. One of the parts reflects the small wooden cicada toy, and it is a large wooden drum that has all these red cords that are flowing down from it, and it really invites the inner child to have this kind of wanting to touch it kind of feeling. A player piano has been recreated, playing a Mobius strip to reflect the idea of the eternal return. This installation is also extended into a performance art piece called Play Pattern Number 2, After My Garden Grows. This is the second of 14 play patterns. They're presented as vigils for the 14 million girls that are to be wed in child bride marriages in the coming years. After My Garden Grows is initially a film by Megan Mylan. It's a film about girls in India as child brides, and they would usually marry before they come of age. By giving them an option of owning their own plot of land, they could have financial freedom and independence, and usually they would opt to marry a man after their garden grows. If you have a chance, I recommend that you open your listening ears and you stand in the middle of the room first, and to close your eyes and try to locate where the sounds are coming from, and then go in to discover the different small toys that I put around.
My name is Sheet Ling, and I'm based in Vancouver and Taipei. The work I have in this exhibition is called a Cellar. I usually do video performance, installation art, and sometimes sculpture. The artifact I chose was a can sealer handle. I was very fascinated with this particular object because it was really out of context of anything. I couldn't really figure out how this object was supposed to be with. And I would like to have an object that's cross-cultural, that all human beings beyond race can connect with. I was drawn to the can sealer handle, a cross-cultural object invented for people to save food during times of hardship. This reminds me of my own personal experience of living during unstable times growing up in Taiwan, working in a factory selling bottles during my childhood. There are three concepts in my piece: deprivation, exploitation, and overconsumption. These are the three issues society faces from the past to nowadays, and maybe in the future, to the future too. So in the first video, it was me holding the original artifact, the can sealer handle. I was repeatedly rotating, kind of trying to reimagine myself as working with the can sealer equipment. When I look at the objects initially, it really lack of the context. So I really like just using that gesture of operating this imaginary equipment that's not there. And I would like the audience to fill in that missing part themselves. So
my kind of final thoughts on this exhibition is that I was really excited the more I started talking with the artists and seeing the work that was being presented, because each artist didn't necessarily just choose one object and respond by creating one work. Each artist actually wound up creating an immersive environment for people to kind of draw themselves into, or a really neat web of constellations of ideas and concepts for people to dive into. So it kind of, rather than almost like a focus in on a specific object, it actually was almost like an explosion out of all these different ideas. And then the other really exciting thing was that all of the artists' work started talking to each other and connecting, and all the ideas really do actually make their own return, which is really wonderful.